Hello, I'd like to talk this morning about building learning systems that work, because as far as I'm concerned, we can't just play with one part of the system. We have to think about all of the elements of the system as contributing to the overall success of that system. And I call it a comprehensive learning system because I think that we need to consider each element equally, so none is left to one side, as has traditionally been the case, particularly I'd argue with language assessment, which seems to be a bolt-on, if anything, at best. So what I'm talking about then is the curriculum, and that can be formal or informal. The formal is what we're used to seeing, but informal is increasingly important now as people access language and content outside of the school, outside of the regular system. So for example, through YouTube or through apps or whatever. So we have to consider the curriculum from both perspectives when we're designing a system. We also think of delivery of that system in terms particularly of the teacher, in terms of selection, training, professional development, evaluation, etc. And in the materials the teacher uses. And I probably should have added here in relation to the buildings, the actual classrooms, are they fit for purpose to deliver this type of curriculum? This is particularly important in our area of language teaching and learning. Finally, we think of assessment, and we think of the summative, the judgmental side, and also critically of the formative or the developmental side. And I prefer to use those words actually because there's a lot of confusion, I think, around about formative and summative. And formative for me is where we're helping people to develop and we're not making judgments about them, so we never give them a grade or a number. As far as I'm concerned, that's detrimental. The whole thing can be encapsulated in one simple graphic where we have all three united by that triangle, which indicates to me that all of the bits are working together in tandem to deliver a system. But of course, it doesn't simply work like that. That's not the way things happen. When we think of the comprehensive learning system, we have to think about it in terms of how we develop it. So for example, we need a language development model, we need a systems development model, we need to understand how we're going to put it all together, what the bits are and how they fit together. And we need a measurement model, because if we don't have a measurement model, we're never going to be able to measure success. So it has to be built into the system. So when we think of that system then, who are the people who go to make it up? And that people go right across that range, and you may add more or you may take some off depending on the system you're looking at. And in the papers in this panel, you'll be hearing about, or you will have heard about, how the CEFR, for example, was used in many different contexts. And that's all about what we're talking about here. It's the different contexts and the different people who make up the key stakeholder groups within that context. So the impact of making changes or introducing a new system will have consequences for all of these people. So therefore, if we want it to work and we want it to be a successful system, we have to think about it in a particular way, in a clever way, if you like. We have to think about it in terms of a theory of action, making it really clear to these people, this is what we want to achieve, and this is how we're going to go about achieving it, and bringing those people along with you on that journey. The other critical element is communication. Communication is all about talking to those people and talking with those people. You're not just giving them information, you're actually interacting with people. So the concept here is that when we come to validating a system, the validation is all around the communication. The validation isn't simply like a system delivery use model, or to sort of copy what we do in language testing. It's not just about telling one small group of key stakeholders as we see them that this is how the system works and this is why it works well. It's about communicating with all of these people. I also don't see this communication as being a one-way system. It's actually validation as being co-constructed, if you like. And I think that's a critical area to think about. what we'll take away from this, because this is all about the CEFR, is the CEFR offers us a very useful and applicable language development model, particularly the CV version now, which is specifically designed actually to hit the curriculum delivery and assessment sides of the system. So that's where it's come from right through its history, but the CV has kind of pushed it more into that area, which I think is a really important thing. So that gives us the language side, but we can't forget the context. And far too often we forget the context because we think this is CFR, it must be good for us. Just because it was developed for one context does not mean it can work necessarily in another context, like in your context. So we have to think about how we can make changes to it. So the whole idea then is, how do we bring context and CEFR together? Well, over the years I've seen various projects, the most successful being probably the CEFRJ, the Japanese project run by Tokyo University of Foreign Studies, which was very successful localization of the CEFR. We've seen other versions of it now emerging in Taiwan, and locally appropriate version delivered in China, the China Standards of English, which look to the local context and then rebuild the system, if you like, around the local context. So the takeaways are, from me, for the system to work, all elements must be fully assigned and appropriate to the context. Just aligning them isn't enough. They've got to be appropriate to the context. And this idea then is the basis of localization. And localization is the key. Localization is how you make things happen, and localization is how you make things work. Thank you.